Hi, Dr. Gail.
Hey everybody.
Hi. So why don't you introduce yourself to some of our followers and what we're going to be talking about today?
Love to. Well, thank you for inviting me in. I've actually done a lot of things with health over the years pertaining to mental health and emotional wellness. I am a clinical associate professor of psychiatry at the New York Presbyterian Hospital and Cornell Medical Center. I'm a psychoanalyst as well, and I cover a lot of topics related to emotional wellness, particularly women's emotional health and wellness. I've been actually spending a lot of time in these recent weeks talking to the public about all kinds of mental health issues related to socially distancing and fears about the pandemic, as well as relationship issues, which are really becoming a difficult area for people who are either quarantining alone or social distancing alone or social distancing with others and having strife in those relationships.
So we received a lot of questions primarily about wanting a little bit of privacy when you're at home with the person that you're cohabitating with, or keeping things that aren't constantly, coronavirus related, a constant topic. So I'm going to share a couple questions that we received from some of our viewers. Um, so one of them is, when I need alone time, how can I excuse myself without having him follow me around, or just kind of present, a degree of privacy where it seems as if you can't really have it?
So this is very difficult for in all kinds of dynamic, parent, child, spouse, friend, roommate, all kinds of ways. This has become really difficult for people because you're used to having time alone. Everybody is used to having time alone or time with different people. Rather than trying to be polite by having it as by essentially sneaking away or trying to sneak away, so that you think you're not hurting their feelings. Everybody picks up on when somebody is leaving or trying to be away, and actually the more that you don't talk about it, the more anxious it actually makes the other person, as though something is wrong, and the more likely they are to follow you and sort of keep on you and at you, because they're concerned about how you're feeling about them. So you're much better off saying, these are crazy times. Everybody needs some time alone. Every human, and this is true, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, every person needs together time, social time, and every person needs alone time. And because of the bizarreness of the situation, it doesn't come naturally as it had before. Explain to them that this is zero reflection of how you feel about them. This is how you feel about yourself and your need for some occasional private time. And that, if they're concerned about something, you should talk about it. If you were concerned about something, you would talk about it. But this is just, you would like to have some private time. If there's a particular time of day that you like to do that, then tell them what that is, and tell them that you're just going to sort of go in your room, or go into this corner of the apartment or whatever it may be, to have either time alone or time that you talk with a friend or somebody else, if that's what you want to be doing, or time that you read, take a warm bath, whatever it is that you can have your me time. But tell them this ahead of time, and tell them that's what you're doing. And you can even say, I'm going right now just to have a little alone time. And that is perfectly acceptable. And if you've told them up front, it probably really won't bother them.
How do I approach the other partner after a disagreement? Because it's kind of hard to, step away, take a walk, take a breather. So what is the best way to approach the other partner after a disagreement right now?
So this is actually a plus and a minus in the situation that we're in right now. The minus obviously is what you're pointing out, that you feel like you can't go take physical space somewhere else, and kind of let things dissipate. But the reality is that too many people do that on a day-to-day basis. Usually they just kind of walk away or disappear in hopes that they cannot have a confrontation. And usually what that does is just build up festering and anger, and it sort of eats away at the relationship. So the good news is actually right now you're forced to, and I'm not talking about having explosive confrontations, but talk it out, whatever it is. So if you're having a disagreement, it's best to say, can we sit down, talk about what we're disagreeing about, and let me explain not what you did, because as soon as you start with the yous, you put the person in the defensive position and they're going to get angry and not listen. So you're much better off saying, I feel in this situation, or this is making me feel, and talk about how you're feeling. Then ask them how they're feeling. If you reciprocate and you make it clear you understand where they're coming from, you help them to understand where you're coming from, you're on a much better footing for resolving the disagreement and hopefully coming to a compromise, or potentially agreeing to disagree, which is always an okay alternative, unless you're talking about something that doesn't have any sort of middle ground, like, are we having a child? And you can't have part of a child or something like that. But
Right.
For most disagreements, you can agree to disagree on things, and you can try to figure out a compromise. But the most important thing is sitting down and explaining how you feel, asking them how they feel, have a mirroring going back and forth. Now, if you reach a point in a disagreement where it is becoming so overwrought with anger that you're afraid of what you're going to say, and remember, you can't take back certain things. Don't call names. Don't go below the belt. But if you feel that's coming on for you and you're not going to be able to contain yourself, it's okay to say, hey, I'd like a timeout. Can I just have a timeout? 15 minutes. Let's each go to a separate area and let me calm myself down, and then can we reconvene? That is a much better thing to do than just blurting out whatever, or becoming abusive in any sort of way. And then just reconvene. You will find that actually in many ways this will make your relationship better, even though you're being forced to do it now in a way that will really serve it well.
How do you find other things to talk about at the dinner table or at different meals or just any other time of the day? Like, how do you keep it from constantly being COVID this, COVID that?
Yes, it is difficult because people tend to talk about what they're worried about. People tend to talk about what goes on in their day, and because everybody's day is revolving around, to some degree, right, being socially distanced, working from home, and all of these things that have been altered by the coronavirus, it is not surprising, right, that we would be, it's all that's on the news. And it's not surprising because you don't feel like you have new things going on that you can talk about. So actually what is helpful to do is twofold. One is to actually enhance your life right now by trying actively to bring in new things that are not coronavirus related. So whether that be a work thing that you have been brainstorming and doesn't have to do with coronavirus and you're working on, and you can talk about with the other people who you're quarantined or socially distanced with, whether that's a book that you choose to read, a podcast that you listen to that's not coronavirus related, a show that you watch that's not related, an interesting thing going on in the world, of which there are many that are not coronavirus related, and you kind of pursue it for, a few minutes down the rabbit hole of, it could be climate change, it could be, all kinds of things that are actually actively going on, even though it doesn't feel like it because we're so bombarded with coronavirus. So making a point of sort of enriching yourself a little bit each day, and then sharing that as a topic of conversation with others, which will encourage them to do the same. You can frankly bring up things in the past that there just didn't feel like there was time to bring up. And I don't mean arguments, but things that interest you. A lot of people right now are finding that there's time to, for example, discuss existential things that actually would make them feel more intimate with the people that they're bunkered down with. How you feel about religion. What do you think happens after death? What's most important in life to you? What really now at this age, as opposed to a previous age, are your goals, or perspective-wise maybe matters more than things did before? Why that is, why that was. Ultimately, maybe places you do want to see in the world. All of those kinds of things that can be put on the back burner because something important seems like it's coming to the fore. You can actively make a decision and go around the table with whoever you're with and say, go a non-corona subject, let's bring up a topic and let's go around and have a discussion. Sometimes people are finding this difficult, and actually people are coming together over book clubs, picking a non-corona related book club to read and then discuss, to play board games together where you just end up talking about something else and having a good laugh. There are, let's say, retro things that one can do that are a good way of having other topics of conversation.
I have a question from someone named Samantha who was in a long distance relationship, and now coronavirus is happening. So what are some tips to make the distance easier?
Again, this is difficult for both people who are in long distance relationships and people who are looking for a relationship right now and trying to create something, because you have to be physically, socially distanced. And I'm kind of laughing because, recently there was this, show in the that almost had foresight, I guess I could say, but no one had a crystal ball. Love is blind, and you were forced to go on and talk to somebody but not see them, etc. And the interesting part about that is that actually being forced to have intimate conversation with someone in a way that you might not have if you were physically with them can really intensify the intimacy in your relationship. Now, ultimately, obviously, one would like to be physical with somebody that one is physical with, but you can get a lot of bang for your buck from an intimacy perspective by talking. I would try to say, do this by FaceTime or, somewhere so you can see each other. And then what I would suggest is you kind of want to pump up the intimacy of the words that you're using. So, we have a tendency to be a little bit inhibited and maybe, sort of use language that, yes, I love you, or, that, I mean, not that that's not intimate, it is, but I would advise you to get a little more specific, maybe even more colorful, more intense in the language that you choose to describe how you're feeling about them, what you love about them, what you find, funny, interesting, things that you'd like to be doing with them. I think they could be, sexual or otherwise. But basically, this is like going to be, prolonged flirting, prolonged, but you can have a lot of intensity of emotion and in intimacy in that way. And in the meantime, what are you doing? You're actually accelerating an aspect of the relationship. You are building it, you are deepening it, and this is very valuable for the longevity of the relationship. You can be talking about future goals. What do you want to do in terms of childbearing? What do you want to do in terms of religion in your life? What are your goals? And so on, those things that sometimes you just never talk about because they're maybe more difficult to talk about, but you can do that. And actually that adds a lot of value to your relationship. So that's what I would recommend. I mean, I can't tell you it's all an upside because it's not, obviously I too long for the day when we can come out of hibernation and people can move along in the way that it was. But the advantage is that, for example, in the dating arena, I am seeing and talking to many people who, would sort of have the hookup first and then see if they were compatible and got along and have, emotional intimacy later. And I would say that there's some advantages to having it go the other way around. And, you're seeing that happen now.
What about people who are just starting to date and, they're thinking about, how do I keep the person interested? Like, this was a question I received on my personal Instagram. Like, how do you keep someone who you're just starting to really get to know interested when there isn't that physical factor?
So I am very aware of this from patients. I'm very aware of this, the public at large. I'm aware of this from even one of my daughters. And it is challenging again, in certain ways, but as I was alluding to earlier, there are advantages here. And the reality is you pretty well know that anybody you're starting something with is probably not being sexual with somebody else. Let's put it that way, right?
Yeah.
And they are available in only this way, but you can really start a dating relationship and deepen a dating relationship in, in at least the emotional ways, and see about a lot of compatibility before you move on to something physical. And that is not all a bad thing. Let's put it that way. You're going to know something about chemistry and physical chemistry from seeing them, from talking with them over time, because a lot of sexual chemistry, physical chemistry is actually emotionally how you feel about the person. Have you ever noticed that you break up with somebody and because you emotionally are not liking them anymore, and they physically start to look less attractive to you, like literally less attractive? Your lenses do change with how you feel emotionally about somebody. So you're building something. If it's something that's moving in the right direction, compatibility wise, emotionally connecting, deepening the intimacy, you're going to feel increasingly attracted to that person. And you will note that even on FaceTime. And then one day we will come out of this and you will have the opportunity to do something about it. And it's true that it could be that you build a lot online and then you're with them physically and you find that you lack a certain compatibility. That is possible. But, more often than not, if you feel all that compatibility online, it's going to translate. In a long, long time ago, people married for different reasons.
Right.
There were many arranged marriages. They married for economic reasons, etc. I'm talking about a long time ago. But, many of those people, they fell in love. They fell in love and they developed something, and it wasn't about like, am I initially hot for you? And, initially is not the most important thing. So it can happen. It does happen. And there are even some advantages to it in the sense that for many people, the hooking up first actually really delays the whole fact-finding and understanding as to whether you really are compatible and really would make a good couple. This is going to put the horse back before the cart, and I don't know that will necessarily be an all bad thing.
I know this might be sort of an off-base question, but we got a comment about, what about meeting 6 feet apart? I feel like that's kind of the same. It's kind of the same thing. You're not. Well, there's not that physical touch.
Yeah, if you are meeting in a socially distant way that's truly safe, maybe it feels a little like upping the ante in that, obviously standing with someone does feel a little more physically intimate, but you're going to be very tempted to break the rules. You really are. If you've built something with somebody and you're really look, in psychologically speaking, being in love with someone, being in lust with someone, having sex, expressing your love, these are life-affirming things. And at a time like now, which feels very, very frightening in terms of your life, there is tremendous temptation to want to do life-affirming things. That's healthy and normal and natural. And I will tell you that I suspect there are going to be a lot of marriages at the end of all of this, people deciding, I really wanted to prioritize having a life partner. Who knew? There's going to be a baby bump 9 months after this is all over, because a lot of people who are bunkered down with somebody are going to be having a lot of sex. It's life-affirming action. It's a good thing. But if you have not had that relationship, you are not quarantined with this person, then, obviously right now it's not the right thing to do, but it will be very tempting to do. Very tempting. So I don't know if you want to put yourself in that tempting situation where then you will break your rules, so to speak. But if you really think you can do it, doing something in a different environment can be very fun and enjoyable and further your relationship. So if you can take a socially distant walk in a beautiful place and both admire nature because that's something that you both feel about, and that, makes a connection between you, that's fine. I mean, that really is fine if you can maintain that. If you can have a socially distanced adventure with each other, and that's good, because the truth is arousal of any sort, like I'm enjoying this adventure, is exciting to me. And then you're with somebody, we know from social psychology that transfers, and it actually ups the feeling that you have about the person that you're with. That's why when people ask me, hey, what can I do to spice up my relationship? I say, go do something you've never done before with this person and have like an adventure that's new and playful, because the arousal and excitement you feel about that causes the brain to release dopamine, which actually is also the hormone of love and bonding, and you feel that way about the other person. So on the one hand, it could be good, but it's going to be challenging to stay socially distant.
Where do you feel like, what do you feel like is going on in relationships that either end in a breakup or divorce after quarantine, or the relationships that end up flourishing during this time?
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think we're going to see both. I think we are, like China, probably going to see a divorce peak too. We know right now that rates of domestic violence are going up. And why is that? Because for people who are in a potentially abusive relationship, physically or emotionally, they're being forced to socially distance and lock down with their perpetrator. And they've handled their situation by being sort of out of the home or away from this person as much as possible, or it was sort of a tenuous situation, but they're in it because of the financial desperation, fears of being alone. There are children involved, and maybe things have been okay-ish or manageable, let's say, as long as the perpetrator was, working out of the home, doing other things, and also the perpetrator wasn't tremendously stressed. Mm-hmm. So in the circumstance of all of those things coming to an end, people, perpetrators may be out of work, they're tremendously financially stressed. Everybody is stressed right now. Home can become a tinderbox, and we are seeing, like I said, these increases in both physical violence, emotional abuse, and or even a milder version, I guess I'll say, of discovering that this person you're trapped with all the time, you're miserable with, and you see the worst come out in them, and you're hardly at your feeling your best. And so at the end, I do think there will be a feeling of, this isn't working, and I think that's what that's what you saw happen in China. I suspect it will kind of happen everywhere, that this has been enforced for a long period of time. So yes, I think there will be a divorce peak, but those are the people for whom there was already probably bubbling difficulty. And let's say the curtain's been peeled back and it's become very visible and very difficult. And as I said, people's perspective is changing now. You're being forced to have a lot of time to think, what matters to you? What really matters to you? When we're forced with a potential life and death situation, that's what happens in your mind. And as people think about what matters to them, some people are going to say staying in a loveless marriage is not it, right? And right. Other people are going to say, not having a partner, not having, not building a life with somebody, not starting a family, not whatever those things might be. That's what matters. I'm not happy with that. That's what matters to me. And I'm going to take a leap. So I think, like I said, there will be people deciding they're going to be together. Look, there have been people who've been forced to, well, not forced to, but have chosen to speed up the relationship that they were in that was fairly new. And suddenly they're quarantining with that person. Why? Because they don't really want to be alone. And they really, they're like, hey, this started, maybe it'll go somewhere, but I'm choosing you, and some of those relationships are going to work. So I think there will be people who make that decision because of the perspective they've given. and people who will decide this so is not working and make that other decision.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And again, I'm Taylin Washington Harmon. I'm an associate editor at health.com. You can reach me at Taylin Harmon on Twitter or Instagram if you have any questions. And yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Saltz. You have a great day.
Thanks so much for having me.
You're
Appreciate
welcome.
it.
Bye-bye.